Start the recording. I think it has started. Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to the community meeting of Kiali. We are going to present version 1.67, and this is a sprint 89. So this is our agenda. We are going to go through a summary of the sprint 89. We are going to see the highlights for this version 1.67. We are going to see a preview of the next sprint, the sprint 90. And finally, as always, we are going to have our community discussion. So this is a summary of what we have done in this sprint. There is a lot of issues done in Kiali. We have finished 32 issues, and we are still 14 in progress, that some of them probably will go to the next sprint. We have 3 main epics in progress, and there was also some work in the Kiali operator, and also some of the work in Kiali OpenShift Service Mesh plugin, as you can see there. And now we are going to see the sprint 89 highlights. So this is an update about the Kiali Component Library. I will pass the mic to Fernando to present these highlights.
Thank you, Yosune. Okay, so with respect of the OpenShift Dev Console plugin, we are in progress. As you know, currently, most of the views that we have on the current OpenShift plugin are using iframes. So our target is to convert all of them to native React application. Currently, we have the Istio config list, and this spring we have finished the overview view that you can see in the slide. Currently, we are working on the Istio config list in order to go to the Istio config wizards, the creation of Istio objects, and the mesh tab, the Istio config details page. We expect to have a release to JS soon, as far as we convert all the pages that we have currently in iframes to native. Next slide. Okay, this is related to plugin. With respect of backstage, we have started to work in a Kiali plugin finally for backstage. We expect to have a preliminary release for next sprint. And in order for backstage effort, we will have to split the component library, the core UI library, in creating another submodules for types due to how backstage plugin is being implemented. And that's all for the component library progress. Back to you, Yosune.
Thank you, Fernando. And so this is another epic that we have been working on, multi-cluster, and this is an update about our progress in this sprint. We have defined an issue with all the features that will be included in multi-cluster for alpha support. As highlights, we will say that we are going to include support for primary remote deployment model. And here in the diagram, you can see an example that is quite similar about what we have in an environment that you can start with our hack scripts for multi-cluster. We will have just one control plane deployed in one cluster. And we are going to see and talk with the Kubernetes remote cluster and get the information just using the Kubernetes API. And this is also going to be just for one single mesh. Another remarkable thing is that we are going to support just read mode for the remote clusters, but we are going to keep support for write mode in the local cluster. And that means that, for example, it's not going to be possible in the first support for multi-cluster to create Istio configurations in remote cluster, but it's going to be possible to create for the local cluster. And in the following link, GitHub link, you can see all the specific tasks that are going to be finished for this first alpha support. And we'll continue with multi-cluster. You can see there an example of the applications list view. That this is one of the features that has been finished for this sprint. It was also finished the services list view, and the workloads view was finished in previous sprint. Also, the Istio configuration page list is in review at this moment, so probably it will be released in this release. Another finished work is that we have combined the duplicate namespaces in drop-down selector. In the image, you can see the namespace that are not duplicate. This was something that was duplicated in the previous sprint, and it was because we have the same namespace deployed in 2 different clusters, but we have unified that view. And another change is that we are going to get the home cluster name from the Kiali configuration. And this was something that we can see like a Kiali home cluster in the cluster name, but this was changed. So now you can see, like for example, in this image, in the cluster, we have the names like West, that is in this case is the remote cluster, and East, that is the local cluster. And as for the next work, that is the most of them as a work in progress at the moment, is we are going to include the health calculations for multi-cluster. Also, we are working in the details views for application, workload, services, or Istio configurations. And we are going to start working in the mesh page and the overview page. We expected to have more changes for the mesh page, and well, probably less changes in the overview page. And well, this is another thing that will be in this Kiali version. That is the version that will be shipped with Istio 1.18, and it's a first support for Istio Ambient. I'm going to show a quick demo. And you can see here, in this case, we have a kind cluster, and we have started Istio Alpha 1.18 with the profile ambient. So you can see how in the control plane is detecting that we are starting Istio with ambient profile. So you can see a label here. And there was also a namespace that is labeled with data plane mode ambient. So we can also see the ambient label into the namespace card. Another change is like you can always also see that there is no warning about missing sidecars for these workloads that are not including sidecars, but for the other side are including any component of the ambient mesh. So, for example, if you go to a specific workload, we can see that in this case, this has a cTunnel component and also a waypoint proxy, because in this case, we have applied a waypoint proxy into the namespace level, that is the book info. We can also see, for example, the Istio waypoints as a workloads and all the versions. And we can see how the components are labeled as a waypoint proxy. That indicates that this is part of the infrastructure of Ambient. Just to finish with this demo, we have a namespace that is not labeled with sidecars or with ambient annotations. And we can see how instead of the missing sidecars, we have a message indicate that is out of the mesh because it doesn't include any component that labels or includes that namespace as a part of the mesh. So this is the main changes that will be included for Istio 1.18 in that Kiali version. We will continue with the next features. Well, there is a new setting, the cluster-wide access, that when it's set to true, the operator is going to create a cluster role and the server will have the cluster-wide permissions. So it will have access to all the namespaces in the cluster. This configuration allows more efficient caching, and this is because the way that Kubernetes watches are implemented. It is possible to watch a single namespace or all the namespaces cluster-wide just with one watcher. When cluster-wide access is set to false, the operator will create a role for each namespace that is in the accessible namespaces list, and there is a new default for accessible namespace, that is the double wildcards. And this means that all the namespaces in the cluster are going to be accessible. And for this reason, accessible namespaces must be set when cluster-wide access is false. And this option is less efficient, specifically when there are a lot of namespaces in the accessible namespaces list, because it will require to create a watcher for each namespace that can affect the performance. Not sure if Jay wants to add something else.
No, that was a good description. I mean, it's basically, actually, this came around in response to the next slide, which you're going to show, which was to talk about discovery selectors, which I'll let you go through now. But overall, what we were trying to do is make things a little bit easier. There's been a lot of confusion and questions around our accessible namespace approach and how that ties together with permissions. So what we're trying to do is separate, really kind of make more distinct the permissions that Kiali has, with accessible namespaces being something that's a bit not as tightly tied together with that. So, and we'll be making a lot of documentation changes and updates in Kiali.io to describe this stuff better.
Thanks, Jay. So, this is a feature that introduces support for the Istio discovery selectors feature, and this limits the set of namespaces that Istio processes. And this means that only the selected namespace are going to be part of the mesh, so it reduces that list. So in this case, Kiali will inspect the Istio config map, looking for the field discovery selectors, and if this is set, it will use this list to choose the namespaces that will be available to the user. That doesn't really have to be a list because it can be used like regular expressions or selectors for this. And when this is not set, Kiali will check for accessible namespaces setting and will make those available. When this is not set, all the namespaces are going to be available. Discovery selectors and accessible namespaces can work at the same time. And in this case, for a namespace to be accessible, it must be specified in both settings. This is much about it, but as Jay said, we will be more explaining with more details and with different examples in the Kiali documentation. For the next feature, I will pass the mic again to Jay.
Yeah, thanks, Josune. So this is kind of a small feature that we put in. It's targeted to people or to users that are unhappy with the default behavior of the list pages, which is to say, so what Kiali does in general is we try to provide a very rich set of information on our pages. And that pulls in a lot of information and it does a lot of calculation. So, if you're looking at the services list page or the applications list page, we're calculating health for those things. We're calculating, we're doing validations of configuration. We're doing a lot. And there's times when users either don't want all that information, or more likely they're not willing to wait for it, because if you have a very large installation, these pages have shown to sometimes be too slow for the user's needs. We have long-range plans to try to speed it up in a way that people should always be able to see all the information. But until that time, this is a bit of a stopgap, which allows you to set in your configuration whether or not you want, excuse me, to show some of that information. For example, health. By default, you'll see no changes, meaning this version will act just like the last version of Kiali. You'll get all the information. But if you prefer to, you can go into the Kiali CR and make a few tweaks. I will do a very short demo to show you how that works. So inside of the Kiali CR, there's a section that's that's been there for a long time, called Kiali Feature Flags, and underneath that, there's something called UI defaults, which are literally UI defaults, meaning if you configure it there, and it's going to affect the UI default behavior. This is the new section that exists from this PR or this feature. There's a new list section, which affects the list pages. And there's 3 toggles that you can set in advance. There's include health information, include Istio resources information, include validations, and those by default will all be true. So those are actually the default settings. So that's why you get them just the way you did in the past by default. And then there's one called show include toggles, true or false, which means you can change the behavior and not allow users to change it in their session, or if you do show the toggles, they will be able to actually change it. So having it set true means it'll show up on screen. And I will just show you what that looks like here. So this is the services list page, for example. I'm showing the toggles. I set that option to be true. So you're going to see that there's a health toggle, those 3 different things that I mentioned. They're all enabled by default. But if they were to say be set false by default for health, you'll notice the health column went away. But moreover, not only is it the column going away, the request for that information is going away. The calculation of health is going away. So you're going to get a simpler page with a better response time. And as you might imagine, the same is true for, you may have noticed that the detail went away on the right side. And if you want to get rid of validations, that whole configuration validation column went away. And then you can add it back in. Now, it may be that you want to just make those settings and not show the toggles. If in that case, you would have set that value to false in the CR, and you would just get it. The users would not actually be able to change it. It would just look like a normal page with no options. And that is the new feature. So if you are having any troubles with your list pages or you want to simplify them, this would be for you.
Thanks, Jay, for the...
Thanks, Josephine. Yep.
Okay, so that was the feature. And well, these are some notable changes for this in this sprint. We have made a change in the operator that is going to watch new namespaces that are created. And when they are, every Kiali CR is going to be reconciled. So it will check if the Kiali server needs to give or be granted access for the new namespace. Another notable change was that the operator has it was improved with performance enhancements, and it's going to be speeding up in the installation and uninstallation for the Kiali server. There was a small fix, but when the horizontal scroll was hidden for the workload both slows in some browsers. When the load line was too large, it was not able to see. And with this fix, we hope to have fix in all the browsers supported. And also there was a couple of fixes regarding validation errors for when we enable MTLS in the control plane that were it was creating some generate destination rules. And we has basically, in that cases, specific cases, disabled the validations that were warning about the rule KIA 0401 and 202. Well, that was it. So now we are going to see a preview for the next sprint. As you can see in the left, we are going to keep working in the main epics. First, our main priority is going to be multi-cluster. Also, we will continue working in the OpenShift Service Mesh Console plugin to be native. We will continue with Kiali working with Istio ambient mesh. And a couple of EPIs, the tempo support, and also the pattern fry topology for the Kiali graphs. Well, in the backlog items, we got mainly some issues related to that epics, talking about the details pages for multi-cluster, the views for the Istio config wizards in multi-cluster, some of adding more coverage for Cypress test. And well, we will start the community discussion. I will going to stop the recording. It's not stopping.
No way to stop.
No.